From Ridley Scott's epic about Napoleon to a film on the woman who brought the music of the tiny Cape Verde Islands to a worldwide audience. Welcome to today's film show.
I'm the first to admit when I make a mistake. I simply never do.
And to talk about those films, I'm in the studio with film critic Lisa Nesselson and the filmmaker behind the documentary Cesaria Evora, the Barefoot Diva, Sofia Fonseca. Hello to both of you. Thank you for being here. Now we're going to start with the blockbuster release this week that is dividing French and Anglo critics. Director Ridley Scott, actors Joaquin Phoenix and Vanessa Kirby were in Paris for the world premiere of Napoleon. It said that since cinema and TV began, more than 400 actors have portrayed Napoleon, from Marlon Brando to President Zelensky. So, Lisa, should Joaquin Phoenix have thrown his distinctive hat into the ring?
Well, Phoenix is unquestionably the best actor to play Napoleon in a film released this year. Next year, however, the world will be able to see the definitive restoration of French film pioneer Abel Gance's groundbreaking 1927 silent Napoleon, in which dead ringer Albert Dieudonné plays the title soldier and eventual tyrant. Now, I am wearing a now 40-year-old T-shirt with the likeness of actor Albert Dieudonné from when the then best version of Gance's epic was shown here in Paris. I've seen it 3 times in my life at lengths varying from 3.5 hours to 5.5 hours. It's breathtaking. That said, Ridley Scott, at a mere 2 hours and 38 minutes, knows what he's doing. His Napoleon is a crash course with a lot included, also a lot missing. Scott was adamant about making a motion picture for the big screen and not a 10-part miniseries for TV. The spectacle is very much there. The battle sequences are quite something, especially Toulon and Austerlitz and Waterloo. Well worth waiting for. All the actors are good, but Rupert Everett is a hoot as Wellington.
He certainly is. Well, let's take a look at the guy from Corsica whose goal was merely to rule all of Europe.
What is your name?
Napoleon.
Has the course of my life just changed? Napoleon.
I'm destined for greatness. But those in power will only see me as a sword.
I suggest you take the throne as a king.
Shall we vote?
Napoleon and Josephine's lusty but tricky romance is quite frank and interesting. Bonaparte, of course, fired many a cannon, but Josephine, played by Vanessa Kirby, also called some of the shots.
So Ridley Scott has made a biopic about Napoleon. Sofia, you're here to talk about your documentary on Cesaria Evora. There has been some criticism of Ridley Scott that he didn't stick entirely to the facts and the film isn't completely accurate. Do you think biopics need to be accurate, like documentaries do?
Well, I think there's a difference between biopics and documentaries. The boundaries are increasingly blurred between genres today. And I think it's always depending. It always depends on what you assume about your film. If the director says and assumes that there are some fiction, I don't see nothing wrong with that. But if you say that it's a documentary, well, and if you are talking about the story of someone, it's important to be factual. But if nowadays you can mix, sometimes you can mix the genres, the different genres, and well, it's that. If it's assumed that there is some fiction, it's not the first time that we see a love story like Napoleon and Josephine in a more romantic way than it was maybe in reality.
Okay, no, totally agree, as long as they're transparent. Here's what Ridley Scott had to say about his fascination for Napoleon.
Apart from being an incredible strategist, a marvelous, intuitive, both politician and strategist, and was merciless. And yet there was something about him that fascinated me, in that how could a man like this who's on his way to take Moscow, to take Russia, be obsessed with what his wife is doing back in Paris.
So Ridley Scott told the BBC that more than 10,000 books have been written about Napoleon, pointing out that that's one every week since he died. Lisa, can you sum up the film in less time?
Certainly, with apologies to Tchaikovsky and to the year 1812. Joaquin Phoenix once played Johnny Cash. Here as Napoleon, he has a stash of proud defiance and of rather hot romance. Sees Josephine and then adjusts his pants.
Thank you very much. Wow. It's like every time you're in a studio with someone who sings, a singing critic, we're lucky to have you. Or from one singing talent to another now. Cesaria Evora was a Cape Verdean singer who was discovered at the age of 47 and went on to achieve international fame and shine a light on the mourner style of singing. She's the subject of a new documentary called Césaria Evora, the Barefoot Diva. And the documentary's director, Sofia Fonseca, is here in the studio with us. Now, tell us more about Cesaria Evora's story and why it's such a good subject for a film.
She's an amazing character because, in fact, she's an amazing person. And for me, it's important to tell her story because I think that if you know more about the woman, you will better understand her voice. A voice that conquered all the world, singing in a language that the most part of the people cannot understand, but can feel. And music, arts, it's almost always about feeling and sensations and emotions.
Cesaria also played to audiences all over France. How important is France to her story?
Well, first of all, for me, it's really important to be here and to share the film with the French audience because Cesaria Evora, she used to say that if we're not the French people, if we're not the French, it was impossible for her to manage to success. So for her, France, she has a special affection for France and for the French people. So it's really, for me, it's really important to share the film here.
Okay, well, if you're unfamiliar with Cesaria Evora, it's an incredibly affecting voice. Here is a sample.
Conseguimos entrar num meio que nenhum artista africano naquele tempo tinha conseguido.
Elle a une voix unique. C'est quelque chose qui vient des tripes, qui vient de sa vie, qui vient de son pays. Ça ne se fabrique pas dans un studio.
Lisa, then tell us, why is this documentary an important addition to the record on world music?
Well, if asked to name the greatest American or British or Italian singer, I think most of us would have a hard time choosing. But ask about Cape Verde, and I think there's only one possible reply. Cesaria Evora, an incredibly poor woman with an incredibly rich voice. Cape Verde, an African archipelago where slavery lasted into the 20th century, only secured its independence from Portugal in 1975. But Cesaria was a free spirit, ferociously devoted to living her life as she saw fit. She grew up partly in an orphanage, and her surviving friends from those years are understandably astonished that she went on to sell millions of record albums. Having growing up in precarious, dirt-poor circumstances, we're told that she always dreamed of a house of her own. She got that house, but also a collection of hangers-on to whom she was extremely generous. Some call her the greatest Cape Verdean of all time, but with age, touring far from home took its toll. And we hear her say, if I could remove my old voice and give it to a young person to go on tour in my place, I would.
And Sofia, how did she open the door for other female musical talents from Africa?
I think that Cesaria is really important because we are speaking about a woman that she is the one who puts Cape Verde on the map, in the international map, and she opens the door to the new musicians from Cape Verde, and we are speaking about a country very rich in terms of music, with a lot of talent and creativity, with incredible musicians and singers and composers. And nowadays we have a lot of new people singing, and new female voices, and they are singing morna and coladera, among other genres, but they are singing all over the world again. And I think this is also the legacy of Cesaria. In part, it's also her legacy.
And why did she always perform barefoot?
Well, marketing, in this case, marketing becomes from the reality, because Cesaria had no shoes. Since the beginning, since a child, she was barefoot. So, and we cannot forget that Cesaria was born during the colonial time. And on that period, it was really hard for someone like her without money. We cannot forget that we are speaking about a woman that has within her all the prejudices. Black, poor, and woman. And when she was a child, she was barefoot. So imagine in a place like São Vicente, there's a kind of a law that the people without shoes cannot walk in the main part of the main square. And I think this marks a person.
Anna, Sofia, thank you so much for joining us. The film Cesaria Evora, The Barefoot Diva, is out in France next week. Now, just before we go, set amid the snowy mountains of northern China, the breaking ice follows 3 young people over the course of several days as they form a brief and life-changing friendship. It's the latest film from Singaporean director Anthony Chen. He was our guest on the film show a couple of weeks ago. You can catch up with that interview on our website. The film hits cinemas in France this week. We'll leave you with The Breaking Ice. Thanks to Lisa. Thanks to Anna Sofia. It's been a pleasure. See you next time.
怎么生的
？18岁说的少。
想怎么活怎么活呗，放松一点儿，人生不就那么回事儿吗？